Well, if anybody can get a stream to that car park CCTV, can someone please send it to me? Because we need to see this footage. Welcome to the Anglo-Italian pod. As always, guys, my name's Rory, and I'm joined by my very good friend, Adam. Adam, how you doing, man?
Yeah, keeping very well, thank you. Trying to make sure that I'm not resembling Manuel Ugarte, as I am constantly reminded on TikTok lives these days. But yeah, keeping very well and enjoying the Game Week 12 events in the Premier League. So, how are you doing in Milan, more importantly?
Well, it turns out the Alex were just waiting for me to put on my Alex shirt. We've just wrapped up
That's what it is.
our Serie A show. I've put on the Alex shirt and they've just scored the 92nd minute as they're surging forward again. Maybe get a winner. Oh, not quite. Guys, I'm not going to commentate the entirety of the last 5 minutes, but I'm quite nervous at this point, hoping we can get a win over that lot down the road. It's looking good at the minute. Yeah, not a bad weekend. Arsenal won a game. It felt like forever, so I can sit and listen to my podcast this week, so that's nice. But even better news, Leicester managed to get their business out of the way early, so it wasn't post or record, and they have sacked Steve Cooper, so we can talk about it. I don't know about you, Adam, but when I saw that news, I was genuinely a little bit shocked. Was I stupid to be shocked? Like, were you surprised by this news?
Kind of in the middle, shall we say? Not surprised entirely, but also I don't know what Leicester are expecting at this stage in the season, if that makes sense. I think I don't think they necessarily got behind Steve Cooper, and I don't feel that Steve Cooper endured himself to the Leicester City fan base or the club itself. It seems like there's been a lot of murmurs of maybe potentially didn't buy into what Leicester City stood for example, and what they've been built on, for example. So I think naturally his connections to Nottingham Forest were the kind of vein points for the Leicester City fan base, and they never warmed to his tactics either. I mean, if you look at a lot of the metrics, and I'm sure we'll go into detail later, but yeah, it's been one of those where I think he's been struggling to win them over, and unfortunately it's never been really a favourable position given that he's not been able to really do much in a transfer window either. So I think it was always a difficult task. I feel sorry for him, but obviously I think Leicester City are looking at the bigger picture, which is that they don't want to get relegated to the Championship because they potentially face a case with the EFL if they did get relegated. So I think for their sake, they want to maintain Premiership status, and based on the form of late, it didn't look too pretty, it's fair to say.
Yeah, I think when you look at the table, it's easy to assume, like, you know, they've got, 10 points from 12 games or 12 points from 10 games. They're kind of doing okay. They're relatively clear of the relegation zone. And you think, okay, on appearance, everything's looking good, but their underlying numbers are 10 points from 12 games. I was right the first time. The underlying numbers aren't particularly promising or weren't particularly encouraging. I do think against Chelsea in this particular game, it's a weird game to pick to fire him after, because you've just had an international break, which would have been the perfect chance to get rid of him if that's what you wanted to do. And then a performance where I think arguably they could have had another penalty. They could have got into the game later on. I think there was enough in that performance of its own to be like, okay, there's something here. But it kind of seems to me now that, you know, like, if, like, in politics, they say, like, if you appoint someone to your cabinet and after a month you fire them, you fucked up. If you fire them after a year, they fucked up, right? And it's like, this just seems like from the offing, Leicester got the wrong appointment. Now, I know they wanted Graham Potter, but there was issues there, as you alluded to, with this kind of the spending and the kind of, obviously he clearly wanted a bit more money or had a few more demands, maybe higher wages. But it feels like, as you said, they didn't back him from the beginning. And I read a really interesting piece in The Athletic today, which kind of broke down what went wrong with Steve Cooper. And I think one of the things was that the players clearly didn't really get on side with him. And it's something that's kind of been leveled at him in the past, that players have found it hard to get on with him. But there was things like he invited like Jerry Taggart, and I can't remember who the other guy was, but like club legends to sit down and talk to him and kind of tell me about Leicester. Like, I know I've been Nottingham Forest, but I want to know about this club. I want to be part of the DNA. And it feels like he did make an effort. But for the owners, you knew the whole time that he was Nottingham Forest or he was like ex-Nottingham Forest. You can't then, after 3 months, not even that, sack him and be like, oh, yeah, well, it turns out your connections were a problem for us. Like, it's not, for a club that was so well run, consistently for so long, it's an odd bit of like mismanagement from them, right?
Yeah, definitely. I think when you're kind of rushing to make an appointment, that's probably the time where you're going to make more like of a bad decision, if that makes sense. I think
Mm-hmm.
they really should have taken the time, even if it meant that it made it maybe delayed in terms of their preparation. But clearly, I think after Enzo Maresca had left them for Chelsea, that was a perfect opportunity where you kind of start lining up these candidates. There's every chairman generally has like a black book where they kind of make a note of certain individuals where they think, I really dig what he's trying to achieve.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they just probably just have a vibe of they didn't really have a plan. They didn't have a plan A, they didn't have a plan B, plan C, for example. So I think they're fortunate that someone like Steve Cooper accepted the opportunity, but I also think they just didn't really give him the opportunity to push it through. And maybe, who knows, if he was given until January, could he have done something in the transfer window and turned their season? I mean, look, as you allude to, they weren't a million miles off from potentially putting themselves out of it at the same time as being still in that cluster of clubs that are at bottom as well. But yeah, I think unfortunately it's just the performances on the pitch, Rory, that dictates, and that's how they're judged these days. But I just don't get a good feeling about his style of football as well. Unfortunately, they were leaving it late in games, for example, to turn it around, for example. And I think it didn't seem like they had a idea in terms of the approach from the off sometimes in certain games. This was a good example of that, where for 70 minutes or so, they were really trying to defend as much as they can, but I don't think it was naturally within the kind of individuals on the pitch, that kind of style of game that they wanted to really play out. The fact that he took off Jamie Vardy, I think, was the final nail in the coffin. I think they see Vardy as someone that epitomizes what Leicester City is all about. And when you've got a player that wasn't able to really chase down balls in the same sense as he would traditionally do, I think they see that as kind of going away from the grain of what they've tried to implement at that club. So, yeah, I think it's been a very difficult task to win over that Leicester City fan base, and inevitably that's what killed their kind of ways. So let's see who they appoint. There's some wild kind of suggestions though at the same time, Rory. So we've got likes of Ruud van Nistelrooy, we've got Frank Lampard inevitably, we've got David Moyes, and Graham Potter again. So I don't know if they naturally spring out to me as good replacements. I'd probably, out of the lot, probably go with David Moyes, because I think he's someone that will just bring the group together, make them hard to beat. I think he will get results. But yeah, Rory, does any of those names really float your boat for this role?
Frank Lampard's got the hardest working agent in the world, hasn't he? He's linked to every job going. It's absolutely insane. Fair play to him. I think, for me, if I was a Leicester fan and if I was the Leicester board, I'd be looking at Graham Potter, because I personally think this Leicester squad is more than good enough to stay up in this division. I think there's enough quality there that they will get results. There's enough in the performances that I've seen that I think they'll be fine. Like, they're better than Everton. They're better than Palace. They're better than, like, I don't know, are they better than Wolves? Maybe not. But they're better than quite a few teams that are down there. And I think Graham Potter is that kind of project manager that they wanted with Maresca, and they thought they were going to have long term with Maresca, right? Until Chelsea came knocking. So I think if you want attractive football, you want someone that's going to be there for the long term. He is someone who'll keep you up. Like, I think if you want the long term view, you go for Graham Potter. But I think what we're going to learn is whether the board are looking long term or short term, because I think David Moyes is the short term option. He also would keep them up. He would keep them up comfortably, I imagine. But maybe you wouldn't get that 3-4 year cycle that you might get if it was Graham Potter, or a 5 year cycle if it was Graham Potter. So we'll see where their focus or where their priorities are. I think we kind of know that it's the short term, because they're so absolutely petrified of getting relegated because of the punishment they'd be waiting, that maybe they will just go for that no risk appointment. Please, God, do not go for Lampard. But, if they do, it'll be good content for the pod, at least.
Exactly, yeah.
So we can only support that move, I suppose. If you have no care whatsoever as to what happens with Leicester City, but that was kind of the one of the stories that caught our eye, obviously, at the beginning of this week. The other one, Adam, in classic Manchester United style, the main talking point is what happened after the game. And I think I summed it up best, if I can say that myself, on Twitter when I said Ruben Amorim, a week in the job, has discovered how unseriously to take the British press. He's already had, who was it, Gary Cotterill crying at him, insisting that he speak English and not Portuguese. And now he's had the entire Sky Sports staff completely ignoring mid-sentence as Ed Sheeran comes to just say hello to Jamie Redknapp, who looks like he's going to jizz his pants that Ed Sheeran knows who he is.
Yeah.
Now, Ed Sheeran has put something on Instagram today saying, like, sorry, didn't realise he was being interviewed, feel like a bit of a bell end, but life goes on. Mate, if you see the camera crew and Amorim stood there, what do you think is happening? Like, it was really embarrassing from Sky, right? I think it, like, really, just genuinely embarrassing, right?
Just unprofessional. I mean, can you imagine if that happened to Jose Mourinho? I could imagine him just walking off, basically. And I'm surprised. If I was Amorim, I would have just done the same thing. I'd just gone, you clearly don't have a damn for my kind of analysis or, kind of talkative kind of sense. So I just leave you to it, basically, if you don't want to kind of record me. So I'd have been like that. And I mean, even Alex Ferguson wouldn't have stood for that. So I think this is pure disregard to him and disrespectful. A really good kind of message I saw on this whole situation was, imagine if we interrupted Ed Sheeran mid-flow in his concert. Would he have the same kind of feelings about us casually just interrupting him? I'm sure he wouldn't feel the same way.
Well, you know what? Sky Sports have the chance to do the funniest thing ever at his next gig if they just get Gary Neville to walk on halfway through
Jamie
his gig
Redknapp.
Start talking about Monday Night Football halfway through Shape of You or whatever of the shite song he's playing. But yeah, I genuinely thought it was embarrassing. I think now Amorim should just give the most bog standard, boring, one sentence answers of just, I'm not giving you anything now. Like, honestly, just, no, sod off. Yeah, sick as a parrot, game of two halves, I'm going home. Like, honestly, I would give him nothing now. But yeah, are we surprised by Sky Sports doing that? Not really.
No.
We've seen the standards slipping for a good while. And then, of course, there was Roy Keane getting offered out at the end of the match, which I think really was the highlight of the game, as Roy Keane. The thing I love is that you genuinely believe he fucking wants a straightener outside in the car park with that bloke.
Yeah,
like,
he 100% wanted it. There's a really good aerial view because I saw one clip which was within the group.
Multiple angles.
The aerial one is the most fascinating because he is obviously with the group of presenters in front of the camera, and all you see him is he's just turned himself away. He's put the microphone down and gone to just have this word with these basically group of fans, and in particular, there's two older gentlemen, shall we say. Giving him what for, and I think genuinely he wanted to give them a thrashing for what they were saying about him. So, I think we would have preferred to see that fight than KSI or Logan Paul, for example, take on whoever it is, boxers, Mike Tyson. I think that would have been a better fight, definitely, Rory.
Oh, absolutely, I'd pay for that one. I'd absolutely pay for that one. I have seen on Blue Sky today, I saw that the guy, the knobhead, whoever it was, has been now like chasing clout and putting it all on social media of what happened, what I said, what he said. Roy Keane shot himself. Just the worst of fucking, what an absolute bell end that guy must be. I can just hope that Roy Keane did actually give him a dig at the end of the game. So fingers crossed, we can all live in hope. But guys, we're actually going to talk about actual football now. So this weekend, absolute chaos as Man City, I think we can officially say, they are the crisis club of the week, maybe crisis club of the month at the moment. Manchester City, crisis, as they go down 4-0 at home to an incredible performance from Spurs. I'm going to try to be nice about Spurs in a couple of minutes. I'm preparing myself. Arsenal got a very convincing 3-0 win against Forest, but nobody cares about that. Elsewhere, Liverpool scraped past Southampton in a 3-2 win, but got the job done. And the other game we want to talk about, a massive win for Wolves at Craven Cottage as Mateus Cunha again proves the difference. And we'll be talking about how key he could be for the rest of the season for Gary O'Neill and Wolves. Guys, we're going to take a very quick break. When we come back, we are going to talk about all the Premier League action. We'll see you there. And we are back. It's time to talk about all the Premier League action starting at the Etihad. I'm going to have to repeat this again. Man City 0, Tottenham Hotspur 4. And before we talk about Man City, I'm very aware that my girlfriend all the time tells me you need to be less biased. You need to be even-handed. You need to be fair when you're talking about teams you don't like. So we're going to start with Tottenham. Adam, genuinely incredible performance. When Tottenham play well, they are an incredible team attacking-wise. And this was one of those moments, right? I think like everything clicked. That front three of Kulusevski, Son and Solanke, there's a real connection there and a real kind of excitement around that attack, right?
Definitely, 100%. I think the way that he applies himself, in particular for this fixture, it seems, Rory, he always seems to get it spot on. And I think what was interesting is if you look at the backdrop of the kind of previous week leading up to it, obviously they lost to Ipswich. They had the kind of rebranding of the club's logo, which didn't go too well. You've got the appeal of obviously Bentancur's suspension. And then you've obviously got the injuries that are taking place as well. So that compounded it to kind of give us the, I suppose, emptiness that potentially Spurs would capitulate against Man City. We all anticipated them to struggle. But I think from an attacking point of view, they really applied themselves in the right manner and, you know, with the right tenacity in front of their team. Because I think Man City thought that they could peg Spurs into their own half, and you know, with the likes of Ben Davies and Radu Dragusin, that they would maybe be a bit hurried with their kind of possession, for example. Also, you know, Basuma getting a yellow card, which I think was probably a record. I think within 11 seconds. I think you're probably starting to think, wow, this could be really brutal for Spurs. But I think we will allude to it. But you know, the attacking nous of Spurs against, you know, exploiting that kind of back line from Man City, you know, forcing mistakes out of Guardiola, which was probably his worst game that I've ever seen him in a Man City shirt. But that was across the pitch. There were so many bad performances. This really just goes to highlight, I suppose, not only were Spurs better in the one-to-one battles, but how poor Man City are across the pitch. The form has gone by the wayside across a number of individual like players in that squad. You know, whereas last season you felt that even when there were pegs in terms of games, there's always a feeling that they would score one more than you, or there was always someone that would grind out something for you. On this occasion, they seem lost. They seem completely like they don't have a clue. And I think this is a real test of Pep Guardiola's kind of management, because I don't recall, apart from maybe a period at Barcelona where he's had a kind of run this severe, where he's lost back-to-back games in the manner and the style of those games as well. I think we should also allude to the fact that Haaland had some chances, and had they gone in, for example, maybe the game's dynamics does change. However, a lot of credit, as you alluded to the individuals like Solanke, for example, to Kulusevski, who I felt had really great games. Son as well. I mean, he's always there in terms of people's kind of, you know, players that play well. But that was emptomised by how well they played it as an attacking force, and really didn't give Man City any chances to really get really going in this match.
Well, I think Kulusevski turning up at De Bruyne's house and putting on that performance is genuinely like, it was just incredible. The raking passes, the assists that he got. I feel like we talked a couple of weeks ago maybe about how if it was now, he'd be in the talk for the player of the season. And I think if he continues like this, he's genuinely been outstanding. Like, Maddison will get the headlines here because he got 2 goals. The first one was really well taken. Like, the touch and the finish was incredible. But Kulusevski absolutely ran this game, and he's been doing it for weeks now. And I think this is like a real crowning moment for him, where he's like done it away at the Etihad. And like, he's a player that obviously we know him from his Juventus days, and he never really got a proper chance at Juve. They didn't really use him properly, and seeing him really settle in now and be comfortably one of the best players in the Premier League at the moment on current form is just really nice to see. And I think he's just consistently running games now, and this was one where he absolutely ran everything here. I think Solanke again won't get many headlines because he didn't get the goal. He did get an assist, but the link-up play that he provides, his profile is really similar to Harry Kane's. I think they found someone who fits that role really well. Obviously, he's not prolific as Harry Kane, right? But he fits that role. He does those jobs really well, and I think him being able to link up with Kulusevski and Son, that front three all of a sudden looks really, really promising. Not all of a sudden, like all Spurs need is consistency, but you can say that across their entire history. All they need is consistency because when they play well, it's really, really impressive. And I think this is one of those days where Ange will sit back and be like, I'm right. I know I'm right. Like what I'm doing is right. I just need it to be more often. I think this is one of those days where you just feel redeemed a little bit. And like, even beyond that, we have to say like the defense is fairly like patched up at this point with no Romero, no Van der Ven. But Dragusin, who's had a difficult time, giving away a fair few goals recently, he played really well. Ben Davies is always steady. He always gives you a 7 or 8 out of 10, like super steady. And I think like Porro obviously getting his goal, like that defense looks really stable. But we do have to say for the first 10 minutes, Man City dominated it and it looked like it was going to be a long day for Spurs. But you alluded to it, Haaland misses that chance, right? He misses that, what for him is a real sitter. And I think if we kind of pivot towards Man City now, because we've talked enough about Spurs, but if we pivot towards City now, I think this is kind of where, and I know hindsight is 2020, but when they sold Julian Alvarez, I was surprised. I was a bit like, okay, it's a lot of money. I understand that money coming on the table from Atletico, you're going to be like, okay, yeah, well, we'll think. But the fact they didn't really bring anyone in to replace him, or if they have Savinho, well, Savinho isn't similar to Julian Alvarez, is he? He's not a replacement for him. But not having that player that when Haaland does hit a bumpy run of form, or if he does get injured, not having that player who can come in and replace him, like no one else has scored for Man City this year apart from Haaland. And he's now really dried up since he told Arteta to be humble, right? It's really dried up for him in front of goal. And I think City have kind of left themselves in a really rough situation here with their transfer business over the summer. The Gundogan transfer, I, at the time, thought was going to be a roaring success. I remember saying on the pod, I am fuming he's coming back. He's going to deliver them the title like he always does. He looks tired. He looks lost. He looks like a shadow of the player that he was before he went to Barcelona. That midfield, I think, Rico Lewis, a player we all really love, but we've only ever seen him in games where they've controlled the game. Here we saw him in periods where they weren't in control, and it wasn't pretty. He was caught out of possession a lot. He wasn't able to hold on to the ball. He was getting tackled. Like, it just wasn't pretty at all. And I think Bernardo Silva is an incredible footballer, but he's not someone that's going to be gritty and get you the ball back and kind of dominate control in the midfield. So I think the midfield was far too wide open for City. And all of a sudden, they've got huge problems in this team. Now, I know they've got a lot of injuries. They've got a lot of players to come back, right? But have they got a replacement for Kyle Walker? Because from what I've seen over the last couple of months of Kyle Walker, I think it's kind of time for him to go, right? I think he's really getting finished in every game now. Like, routinely, he's getting absolutely destroyed. And they need to replace him. They need to go and get Zubamendi in January because that's the player that they're waiting for this Rodri replacement. Like, do you think they just fix this in January? Is this just a blip? Do they turn it around against Liverpool? It feels fairly like systematic issues here. This isn't just Rodri.
Yeah. No, I think it will take more than just one window to fix this. I think they probably overlooked and maybe overshadowed with maybe some confidence, maybe perhaps that they felt that maybe they could get a few more years out of the experienced players. You know, your likes of De Bruyne, for example. Gundogan's a good example of a player that potentially the best of him has now gone by the wayside now. And I feel it feels weird saying that, but based on the performances of late, it doesn't feel like we've got the Gundogan that was prevalent in the last 10 games of the season and pulling through performances that were just world class. Right now, I feel the transition should have happened in the summer, as you allude to. I think PSR and the case is playing a huge factor in terms of why they didn't spend so much money. But I also feel like maybe this is also down to Pep's strategy in terms of like he has a certain style of player that he wants. He doesn't necessarily think about the future. He thinks about the now. And if they don't fit the now, then they don't really fit his kind of philosophy. There's a lot of talk about the likes of whether he should have given chances to the likes of a Cole Palmer, for example, Liam Delap, for example. Could they be players that right now they could be relied upon to maybe give them a fresh bit of emphasis in terms of that squad? I think for both players' examples, they've benefited from the fact that they've left that environment, that they had to really just play themselves. And I think, I wonder if now Pep kind of maybe regrets maybe signing that 1 year extension, because I mean, the legacy that he kind of created is slowly being dismantled by this season. And I think, Rory, the other point is, I don't think people maybe anticipated there to be such a huge gap between them and Liverpool. So, that big game next weekend is going to be massive. If they lose that, or even if they draw, that's probably seen as a defeat in itself, because I think Liverpool will be content with a draw. They won't necessarily see that as a bad kind of result in the grand scheme of their fixtures as well. So I think the fact that there's such a gap now, and you've got this kind of club which feels like they're in transition, it's not looking too pretty for Man City right now. And they have been unfortunate with injuries. I think Oscar Bob was, at the beginning of the season, maybe that person that they thought would push on this season, for example. And the Rodri injury in itself, I think you can see how much of a important figure he is for that squad. I think he pulls all the strings together, and you can see what a difference him not being in the squad, what a gap he's left in the middle of that park as well. So, and to your point, Kyle Walker, he's not the only one probably that should be looking at potentially hanging up his boots. I mean, if you look further afield, I think Kevin De Bruyne doesn't feel like he's got the same energy that he used to, and I think he's probably looking at America these days as well, potentially to retire his career as well. So, look, I think there's a lot of issues, but again, it goes to that point of they're going to have to spend big to address those situations, and it won't be resolved in one window.
Well, I think I'm still fully expecting, because we've not been here before, but we've been in similar situations before. Like, this is the first time I think that Pep's lost 5 games in a row in his career. Yeah. But we've been here before, and I've gone through 2 very tiring seasons as an Arsenal fan where City have started slowly and then somehow won the league. So I'm still not ruling them out, because it's Man City and they're perfectly capable of just winning 30 games in a row. But I think this is the closest we've seen to this team starting to age. And I think, but a part of it as well is like, when you've done, like what they've done over the last 4 or 5 years is absolutely incredible. Like, they've won trebles, they've won doubles, they've got 4 Premier Leagues in a row, whatever it is. Part of it is that those levels and those demands over such a long period of time, there will be a drop off at some point. You cannot sustain those levels for that long. There will be a moment where the players become complacent, or they don't run that extra yard, or they get tired, or like a million different things. Like, when the sheer level that they have been at is so impressive, and I think this is kind of a sign that confirms how impressive it's been, is that the slightest drop off. And we're talking about, and I don't like, Pep's legacy. Like, no, his legacy is absolutely untouchable, court case aside. Like, it's just that slight drop off in standard, and then all of a sudden we're talking like it's a disaster. I know that this is for Man City, this is a disaster. There is a big part of me that thinks they're not going to win the league this year. I still can't say they won't, but there's a big part of me that thinks they won't. And it's just that drop of 3-4%, and this is what happens. That, alongside Liverpool having such an incredible start to the season, makes it look even worse, right? Like, the fact that Liverpool have been this good makes it look like that everyone else, like Arsenal's okay start to the season, looks terrible. Man City's okay start to the season looks terrible because Liverpool have been so good. So I think it needs to be put in context as well, but there's a lot of change ahead for Man City, as you said. I think it's interesting that Pep did sign the extension. I know it's only 1 year, but like, obviously there's some kind of thought of, well, I am wanting to rebuild this team then, because he knows that he needs to replace these players sooner or later. So clearly there's a him there going, no, I will hang around to get the replacement or the next midfielder, the next whatever. So I think it's interesting that decision has been made. But I think I agree with you. It will take a few transfer windows because they have to be careful with their purse strings now because people are watching. So the other thing and last thing on City, because we're going to end up doing the whole show on them, but like even players that come on, like Jack Grealish now, he's getting linked with Spurs, he's getting linked with moves back to Villa. It looks like that move is kind of gone now, and he's not really going to get the chance that he should be getting or could have gotten at City now. It kind of feels like that one's dead. Mateus Nunes from Wolves never really gets a shout. Came in, played all right, but then the second that Gundogan's back or Silva's back, he's out the team, off you go, you're not getting a chance again. So it feels like a lot of these expensive signings that they have made also aren't really working at the moment. Like, remember, Nunes was like 50-odd million, 40-odd million, right? Jack Grealish was 100 million. Like, so these big signings that in the past would have just flawlessly, like Guardiola has just been incredible apart from this game. Those big signings haven't worked out as well. So maybe they need to look at their transfer policies in general and kind of have a look at, how are we targeting players? How patient are we? What is the plan? Because there's a few now, like Savinho still hasn't gotten a goal or an assist this season, I don't think. Like, not enough production from him. Phil Foden has got 1 assist this season, I think, no goals. So, yeah, they need to figure out how to get their players a bit more productive. But they did start the game well, but the second they missed, and then Tottenham just ran away with it. And we do have to finish on positivity for Tottenham. Because I do want to drive, like, it was an incredible performance. And that midfield as well. Like, Basuma is a midfielder I've kind of often doubted. Maddison, we will forever doubt. But this was a moment, and Sarr is always steady. I like him as a player. But Maddison, we do have to say fair play for this performance on his birthday, right? They must have had a hell of a roast after this to celebrate.
Certainly has. But yeah, I do feel like Maddison is a bit of an enigma at Tottenham. You just don't know what you're going to get with him. But this was certainly, I think, alluded to as probably one of his best performances he's ever had. Certainly from the finishing perspective as well. I mean, exquisite, it's fair to say. So, yeah, a lot of credit, but I think he needs to get that more consistently in his game. He can't just rely on these one-off games every 10 or 20 games where he has an absolute blinder. So he needs to work on that consistency. And this potentially smokes any of those rumours that him and Big Ange don't get along potentially. So, yeah, let's see how it kind of carries on. But yeah, certainly a lot of hopes for Spurs fans, that's for sure.
We do have to say, though, there has been a bit of bad news for Spurs today. I saw on Twitter genuinely that Vicario is now out with a fractured ankle. That's going to be a while, and their subkeeper is Fraser Forster. Just as I got a bit of a head of steam, this is not good news, right? Now, we've talked about Vicario having issues at set pieces, but his distribution, his shot stopping in this game in particular, he's been massive for them at times, right?
Yeah, I think arguably, despite the backdrop of the kind of usual kind of issues to Vicario's game in terms of not claiming stuff from corners, etc., I think he's had a really good season overall. I don't think necessarily all the blame should be down to him when it comes to those scenarios, but certainly I think that hampers, I suppose, that stability that they've been trying to build. And as you allude to, Fraser Forster is just a backup. He shouldn't be considered more than a backup at this stage, so he'll play for 1 or 2 games maybe. But yeah, I think the talks are maybe Keylor Navas potentially on a free transfer at least till the end of the season if they can get it done. But yeah, otherwise you're going to have to rely on one of the up and coming kids perhaps to fill the void. But that's going to be a big ask until January, until potentially they might make more of a permanent signing. And I've heard that they might advance for the Liverpool keeper Kiva Callahan even to potentially replace Vicario, because there was talk about potentially Vicario would have someone signed as a backup to challenge him. Wow. So this could be a big move for Liverpool as well as Spurs going into that second half of the season. So let's see what happens. But I think for now, yeah, it doesn't look too pretty, does it?
It's just Spurs fans can never have anything nice, can they? They got 4-0 win against City, and then the next day they've got their keeper out. I know I'm saying that through laughter, but genuinely it's rough for Guglielmo. But let's leave that game there because we've done a good while on that. We got enough out of that, I think.
Yeah.
And let's go down towards the bottom of the table. And Adam, two of our predictions, we don't often get things right. But I feel like we need to pat ourselves on the back a little bit. And I'm going to start by patting you on the back with Matheus Cunha. You were talking about him getting a move to bigger clubs in the short-term future. Well, another absolutely massive performance from him. Incredible goals. He's the player that can keep a team like that up, right? If you've got that quality and someone who can have that mercurial, just game-changing moment, they really have something to hold on to there, right? This was an insane performance from him and from Wolves in general. Like, obviously, Fulham inconsistent, but Wolves absolutely flawless and Cunha unbelievable, right?
Yeah, absolutely incredible. He displays all the traits that you think, wow, why is this guy not at a bigger club, for example? And we forget about the fact that Wolves did buy him for 44 million off Atletico at the time. It's sort of somehow gone past our heads and he's at Wolves somehow. But I think there's a reason why he's at Wolves, and I think that was that discipline that he didn't have potentially to fit into Simeone's kind of philosophy there. But this is the opportunity for him. And I've read a really mad stat, Rory, where the last 20 goals that he scored, 15 of them have been away from home. So,
wow,
and when we think about the goals that he scored, I don't think of them as being tap-ins necessarily. I think of worldies. I think of like exquisite finishes from him. And this is the kind of sentiments, these are the talents, these are the things that I've been seeing for the last few months that I just cannot get my head around. Why has no bigger clubs kind of gambled on him? There's a huge opportunity. Now, that last segment we talked about Man City should 100% go for a player like him. But the problem I'd have is Pep Guardiola would just drill everything that was so good about Cunha so far in terms of his game. So I wouldn't want him to go to Man City. But I just think he's the type of player that could fit into a Man United. He could fit at Chelsea. He could fit in an Arsenal. He could fit in a Spurs. There's so many clubs that would benefit from his abilities. And it's not just him, Rory. There is other players like Andrew Gomez, for example. Phenomenal performance again for Wolves. I just think there's something about Wolves that they've got these talented players that will probably just do enough. I still will stick my head on the line, Rory, and say they will go down. But they're getting results now, Rory, which is the most important thing after that terrible run of form. And that performance I was not expecting. Let's put it that way. I was not expecting 4-1 away at Fulham. I was expecting a closer game than that for sure. Or maybe Fulham nicking it. But I think if Raul Jimenez gets his shot on target, again, this is the dynamics of the game. If that goes in, potentially we're talking about a different game, but a lot of credit to Wolves. That was some great finishes on the day, and they took their chances. I mean, Rory, where do you see Matheus Cunha?
I could see him fitting in at Spurs really well. I'd be gutted that he'd go to Spurs, but I could see him fitting in really well there. I have listened to Arsenal podcasts today that all of a sudden have been like, should we be looking at Cunha? Because the chat has kind of been Umbuemo on a lot of the pods, and then more recently it's been like, well, maybe Cunha. And I think, okay, let's all just get flavour of the week. Both of those players I like. But I think, the only thing is, Wolves, like, you have to hold on to this guy. There is no money in January for you to sell him. No price can you sell him. Because you cannot replace him. You need to have him until the end of the season. And then you can sell him when you're safe. Then you sell him. Because if they sell him in January, then I really think you're basically just saying, yeah, please relegate us, right? So I think, like, no club can come in and get him in January. But in the summer, I think maybe he will be off. Wolves now unbeaten in 4. They drew 2 all the way to Brighton, which is a great result. Then they drew 2-2 to Palace, and they've beaten Southampton and now beaten Fulham away. Their next games are now Bournemouth at home. That's a tricky one, but it's at home.
Yeah.
Everton away, score 1 goal, you'll be fine. West Ham away, Ipswich at home, Leicester away, and then it gets a little bit more difficult. They've got United at home, Spurs away. So they've got a run of like 5 or 6 games here up until like Christmas where they can start really picking up points. They can start really getting like, a couple wins, couple draws, and all of a sudden they're mid-table and looking super comfortable. I think I've seen enough quality in that team throughout the season. They had a really rough start to the year with their fixtures, and I think I'll keep going back to the Arsenal game. It wasn't as comfortable as it looked. Like, they were always in that game, and there was always quality there where I was like, if they get one, we're in trouble. And I think that's the quality I've seen. And we have to say that all of this, whilst they only had one recognised centre-back, like, the Totti is the only centre-back they had, and then they had Lamina playing centre-back. Ike Nori, who is a defender by name only, and Semedo, who is a defender 70% of the time as opposed to 50% of the time. So I think to have that defensive solidity is really impressive as well. And a big part of it is the midfield of Andre and Andre Gomez. And together, they really, really protect that back line. They're both super technical, really good at winning the ball. And I said it when he came into the league, Andre is going to be a player that teams are looking at very, very soon. Like, I'm really impressed with him every time I see him. So I think there's just so much, there's quality in that team, and I'm glad to see Gary O'Neill turning it round like I said he would. Pat on the back, as long as they go and beat Everton. You have to beat Everton, otherwise I'm going to start doubting you again. But for Fulham, this is just one of those days, right? This is just, right, forget this ever happened and move on. Like, it just seemed like everything went wrong for them.
Yeah, massively. Unfortunately, they applied themselves really well to begin with. In fairness, Rory, I think we talked about the Raul Jimenez opportunity, that Alex Iwobi goal. What a hit as well. But this shows you that they've got this in them. So they have like bouts of confidence where they seem to go through games where they feel like they dominate it, and then suddenly something just goes against what they're trying to achieve, and then it kind of folds like a pack of cards, unfortunately. So yeah, I can't really put my finger onto it why they kind of capitulated in the manner that they did.
Didn't they end up with 10 men because they had an injury after they'd made all their substitutions? Did I make that up?
Yeah. So I can't remember who it was that went off, but I think they had someone come off quite late because a lot of their subs were 59th minute and 71st minute is what I'm looking at now here. So if I remember rightly, if it was one of the midfielders, was it?
Anderson, the centre-back. We should have known this. I saw it when I watched Match of the Day. Anderson went down, the centre-back, and then was taken off because of the injury. Puts him down to 10 men in the 77th minute, and then Wolverhampton score another 2, right? So they were already 2-1 up, but then at that point it becomes 3-1, 4-1. So I think, obviously, that's one of those... I'll cut that to make it look much more intelligent than it was. Yeah. Obviously, that's a kind of freak moment that's happened to me on Football Manager a few times, and you're like shooting yourself, you're like punching yourself in the leg like, you stupid bastard, why have you done that? So obviously a bit of a freak moment and result for Fulham, but they just need to forget that this happened and move on, right?
Yeah, 100%. They just need to get over this defeat and move on to the next one. But unfortunately, Marco Silva has done a great job up until now. So look, there's always going to be games like this where you lose unexpectedly, and it's all about how you react to that game. So, a lot of credit to Wolves, but I'm sure Fulham will be fine.
Nice. Let's move on and let's go down to bottom of the table. Southampton 2, Liverpool 3.
Yeah.
A lot closer than I expected this, I'll be honest. I thought Liverpool would make it a much more comfortable, but Adam, I kind of watched this through FOTMob updates and highlights. Talk me through this game. How frustrating are Southampton to watch? How impressive are Liverpool?
How would I describe them? Probably calamitous at moments, mixed in with some individual brilliance, because they have got some good players within the ranks. As I alluded to at the very beginning when I predicted where they'd be, I think the main reason will be down to their transfer business, that they haven't been able to attract the big established players that they need to compete in this league. And it's not necessarily big names, it just needs to be quality of players. I think they're just lacking that kind of depth. But within that squad, through the introductions of the likes of Tyler Dibbling, should I say even, they've got someone that's really exciting. He gives me Jack Grealish vibes through his performance. And he really did help kind of spark that kind of creativity and drive from midfield at times. He was real handful for Liverpool at times, and his crossfield balls, or if it was his just direct dribbling, I think it was just a marvel to watch. It felt like we were watching another promising player that will eventually, Rory, he'll probably get snapped up by a bigger club at some point. It wouldn't be surprising if Liverpool are one of those potential clubs that go in for him as well. But yeah, I think what really frustrated, I suppose, from a Southampton fan perspective, is that you get yourself back into the game and then you throw it away. You throw it away, and it's just a manner of the goals that is so frustrating. Alex McCarthy just going walkies for one of them. The manner of the penalty as well. Both me and my little boy were watching it, and we just both of us laughed. I mean, you couldn't make it up. It was one of those moments where you're like, what is he trying to do? What is he doing there? It's Yakashawa, I think is the name, but he kind of, I don't know what he was trying to do. I get what he was trying to make sure that he wasn't handballing it, but at the same time, he then drags his arm like that, so he's getting his arm extended and scooping the ball. I mean, what was he expecting to achieve? And he was still pointing to it even after it was awarded. He was still pointing to his arm, and it made no sense at all. Unfortunately, that's the problem that Southampton have, and yes, they were missing Bednarek, but I don't think that even improves the situation. I think it makes it 10 times worse.
Let's be serious here. I don't know if anyone's ever missing Bednarek. I apologise, but
exactly, not even the Polish national side are missing him at this moment in time. But yeah, I feel sorry for them, because I think also there was a moment in that game, Rory, where Conor Bradley brings down Adam Armstrong in the box. Now, from another angle, it looks like they're both holding on to each other's shirt at the very moment he's tugged. But I think it's a penalty. I think that's a penalty, personally. If I'm the referee, I'm giving that as a penalty. And maybe it's just a view that the referee sees, unfortunately deceives him in terms of being able to award it. But I think Liverpool get away with a few instances like that, which go in their favour. And look, we've got to credit Mo Salah. The finishes that he brought into this game was just incredible. But it goes to show that with all this talk about him wanting a contract, he's been very vocal about him not being offered a contract, that they would miss his impetus, they would miss his outputs. And I think they've got to be careful here, because if you're saying you're not going to sign a contract, fine, but who are you going to replace him with? You've got to have someone of his caliber ready to kind of come in and take his role. And if you're going to do it, bring him into the January transfer window. Don't wait until the summer. You need someone that can kind of bide in, get some time in with that squad and really get it. For the life of me, I cannot understand why they're not really extending the contract, apart from, obviously, potentially it's the money side of it. That's probably a blocker potentially, but yeah, the way that Mo Salah's gone very vocal about it is quite interesting, and it's causing potential disruption and might even harm their season, Rory, dare I say.
I think... No, I think all the players are desperate for him to stay. All the fans are desperate for him to stay. Everyone at the club wants him to sign a new contract for another 3 years. Look at the shape that he's in. Look at the shape that he's in. There is no way that he's slow. There's no way he's slowing down over the next couple of years, right? He is like an absolute phenomenon. The numbers he puts up are insane. Watching him, I just forget every so often how inevitable he is. It just, every week he scores and you're like, it just becomes normal. It's like wallpaper. And then you're like, this guy is like, third in Liverpool's all greats. Like, if you know what I mean, it's incredible the levels this guy's got. If you're the Liverpool owner, you are turning around and saying, not to be like Rio Ferdinand, but, put the contract on the table, write down what you want and sign it. Like, you have to get him to sign, because every other club in the world with any money is going to be queuing up for him by January if you've not offered him a contract. And he is going to get mad offers from Saudi. He's going to get offers from other Premier League clubs, I imagine. He's going to get offers from Spain, from one from Italy that is about 10 grand a week. But, he will get offers from everywhere. And all of a sudden, your competition is a lot harder and you've got less negotiation and wiggle room. So I think, without sound, they have to sit down with him like this week and be like, right, what do you want? Because he can talk to other clubs as of January. Like,
that's what I mean.
You're running out of time. So I think this is like a really important thing for Liverpool. And if you then have him, let's say he signs a new contract, then you can find that other player, give that player patience, give that player time, give him time to learn the system. There's less pressure on him. Maybe Salah gets brought off in games earlier because, time and age affects everyone. And you've got a bit more grace period for whoever has to try and take over from Mohamed Salah. Because the only player I can see that you come in and you go, okay, maybe he'd hit the same numbers, and I'm not convinced he would, is a ridiculous transfer like Vinicius or Nico Williams at Bilbao, and I don't think any of these would get to levels that Salah is at, right?
No,
but you need someone of that caliber, and you need to give them time, and you need to give them like a bit of a protection so that they're not so under the scrutiny so much. So I think it's really important that Liverpool get this decision right. Obviously, they've got the whole issue with Trent Alexander-Arnold as well, and his contract as well. But I think Salah has to be the focus at this point. And for Liverpool, I have to say, they're just getting the job done. They're having an incredible start to the season. It was really important that they got this win. This is a game that last season or a couple of seasons ago, they don't win this game, they draw or they lose it. And the fact that Slot is able to get them to win these games and they're just continuing to march on is genuinely very impressive. Szoboszlai and Gravenberch, again, outstanding. And I think there's just a real inevitability to this Liverpool team at the moment. My only doubt for them is I kind of get Arsenal 22-23 vibes when we started so quickly and we were just flying out the traps. And then by the end of the season, with all the late comebacks and all the 3-2s and the 2-1s and they're coming from behind, we kind of ran out of energy. I think Liverpool, their strength is that they've got depth in attack, so they could get over it better than Arsenal did. But I think I'm just getting a little bit of that vibe of Arsenal. So I think it'll be interesting to see if they can hold on, because they're clearly the favourites at the moment, and they're having an incredible start to the season. So absolutely fair play to them. But guys, I'm very aware of time. So elsewhere in the Premier League, very, very, very quickly, I don't think we're going to talk about any other games really. Ipswich won, Manchester United won in Amorim's first game. Midfield too old. Ahmad looked very good. Ipswich improving every week. Hutchinson was great, and I really liked Delap. He's a physical monster. I'd be intrigued to see him get a few more goals, but he looks perfectly at home in the Premier League. Arsenal 3, Forest 0. Ethan Nwaneri got his first Premier League goal. He's now our third top goal scorer this season. He's 17. It's mental. Unbelievable. If you want to do something good this week, and it's free, go onto your social media, search for Arsenal Fans Against Sexual Violence, and please sign the petition. There's up to a good few thousand signatures now. Please go and sign that. I think it was poignant to say this week, as number 5 scored and the club put him on this social media. Please go and sign the petition. We need to get that message across to the club. Leicester 1, Chelsea 2, as we alluded to at the beginning. Jackson with a really beautiful goal there. Bournemouth 1, Brighton 2. Matoma scoring again. He's definitely getting back to his best. Villa 2, Palace 2. Dennehy getting his first goal for Palace. Really lovely moment there. Some nice quotes afterwards where he was like, this is just the beginning. I don't want this to be the end. Villa in horrendous form. Strikers not firing, not being able to score. Really not great times for Villa. And then Everton 0, Brentford 0. I saw this through the lens of someone on social media and the frustration of them just screaming, Dyche, change something. One Everton fan in the main stand imploring Dyche, change it, you fucking dinosaur. The frustration at Goodison Park really spilling over against 10 men as well at home. Just absolutely grim. So not much sign for improvement down for the Blues. But guys, we're going to take a very quick break. We're going to leave it there. When we come back, we're going to very quickly preview all the European action and the next round of Premier League fixtures. We'll see you there. And we are back. It's time for our whistle-stop tour of all the European action as we try to squeeze this in roughly 4 or 5 minutes. Let's do it. Here we go. Man City are hosting Feyenoord. A tricky trip here as Man City obviously in horrendous form. Feyenoord are no suckers. It'll be interesting to see if they can continue the bad times at the Etihad. Arsenal will be travelling to Lisbon for Sporting Club de Portugal, up against Victor Gyökeres and his relentless scoring. I'm terrified of what could happen here. Aston Villa hosting Juventus. Adam, this is a super exciting one. They've had Bayern, now they've got Juve. Can they do it again, the villains?
I think they can. I think they seem to be fancying Europe over the league at this moment in time. Emery's got a tune out of this squad for European matches, and Juventus, all you have to do, just listen to us on the Italian edition when we're talking about Serie A. We do not really like this Juventus side very much. They are very much in transition. They don't have a recognised striker at this moment in time, and they're struggling for goals in general. So I think that's probably going to play a part in Villa potentially getting a victory here.
Well, it would be great to see another great night at Villa Park in the European competitions. Fingers crossed for all the villains. And then we have the final game in the Champions League. Oh, it's a big one. It's a massive one. Liverpool's hard fixtures are finally kicking in as they take on Real Madrid at home. If they win this, I'm officially giving up on the title race. How do you see this one going? Liverpool, Real, proper heritage, this football heritage. Real actually underwhelming a little bit at the moment.
I think, you've got the contrast of a successful Liverpool side against it's fair to say, not inspiring Real Madrid side, despite the kind of prospects that they've got within their squad. You know, they should be doing potentially better than they are actually portraying in terms of form right now. Let's not write them off, though, because in them, they've got the opportunity to turn this around. They've got some quality individuals, as I allude to, and that's beyond Jude Bellingham I'm talking about. Of course, the likes of Vinicius Junior, Rodrigo, for example. I think even when you look at the kind of midfields, Valverde, I think the issue here is, Rory, that they haven't got the experienced heads like they would usually kind of rely upon. You know, Toni Kroos is missing, for example. He's no longer there. Luka Modric can no longer kind of last these games as he used to. I think that's the kind of thing that they're trying to transition from. Tchouaméni hasn't really stood up. Camavinga, they still don't really know where he fits into the whole system. So I think there's a huge prospect in terms of this game could be absolutely electric in terms of the kind of end-to-end action that we see. But I think, the form that Liverpool are in, I do fancy Liverpool. I think they'll win quite handsomely here as well.
Against the juju that Real Madrid have in the Champions League, it'll be interesting. But, you know, also the narrative of Trent Alexander-Arnold against his future club, so that'll be interesting to see. In the Europa League, we do have, I'm finding the English teams, we have Manchester United hosting Bodo Glimt, which will be interesting for someone, and Tottenham hosting Roma, Ranieri coming back. Adam, Roma are horrendous. Do you think Tottenham can continue this great form even with Fraser Forster in goal?
Yeah, I would anticipate, but as we alluded to in the Italian edition, I don't know what Spurs side will turn up. It would be Spursy of them to win at Man City and then lose this potential game. However, Roma aren't a team that I would say Spurs should be worried about. It's more about the application here, and I think Ranieri would be happy if they exited this competition right now, to be fair. But yeah, Ange, huge opportunity, and it'd be interesting to see how many are in attendance. The tickets are 70 odd per seat, so not going to be pretty for those that are watching, because they might see a lot of empty seats in the stadium.
It will be interesting to see. Roma are no great shake, so Tottenham really need to get this one over the line. And in the Conference League, I think Chelsea's first difficult game of the tournament, as they're coming up away against Heidenheim, who I think beat Leverkusen at the weekend, having an incredible season. So going away there, I think this is a game that Chelsea will actually have to put in a decent team and see if they can get a result here, because this could genuinely be a bit of a challenge with that one. And that's all the English teams in that competition. So, guys, that is everything in Europe this week. Adam, take us through the next round of Premier League fixtures.
Yeah, so we'll start round 13 games by taking you through the South Coast Derby that takes place on Friday evening. So 8 p.m, you've got Brighton at home to Southampton. But then we move into Saturday's game starting at 3 p.m. So we've got Brentford hosting Leicester City, Crystal Palace at home to Newcastle, Nottingham Forest at home to Ipswich Town, Wolverhampton Wanderers at home to Bournemouth. Before at 5:30, we see West Ham United hosting your beloved Arsenal, Rory. We then move into Sunday's fixtures, and we've got a few bangers here, potentially. So starting off at 1:30, we've got Chelsea at home to Aston Villa, before we also see Man United at home to Everton. We also see at the same time Tottenham at home to Fulham, before the big game this weekend that everyone's waiting for, 4 p.m, Liverpool versus Man City. And that is your round of 13 games.
It's going to be a big one. That Liverpool City game is absolutely massive, isn't it? It's absolutely massive. If Liverpool win that, 11 points clear, you're starting to think it could be their year. Well, guys, that was everything in a fantastic Premier League weekend. Almost more talk off the pitch than on it, but, I think we got over most of it. We covered most of it.
Very well so.
So, guys, thank you for joining us. Make sure to go and check out our sister podcast episode thing of Serie A weekend action. Also, a very good weekend in Serie A, especially Lazio. We get very excited about Lazio, so go and check that one out. Adam, anything to say before I send the listener home?
If you could do us a favour, if you happen to listen to us on Apple Podcasts, if you could just leave us a review to help us bump up our ratings there, that'd be really appreciated. Unfortunately, we don't please everyone, and it's very clear for everyone to see. So please, if you could do us a favour, that would be really appreciated. But otherwise, keep in contact with our socials. Make sure you're on all of them, obviously, because we've got Blue Sky added to the reign of social medias that we've got, right, Rory?
Exactly. I've not seen our rating on Apple Pods, and I don't know if I want to go and check it now. Don't tell me. I'm going to lose some sleep over tonight of whether I look at it or don't look at it, so that'll be fun. Guys, as Adam said, give us a follow on everything. Give us a rating. If you're on YouTube, hit the like and subscribe button down here, and we will see you next time, guys. See you later.
Ciao, ciao.